Welcome to Crimson Ed Talks. I'm your host, Jamie Beaton, sitting down with our co-founder, Fangzhou. Today, FC and I are going to be diving into one of the most controversial topics in education. For an entrepreneur, is a college degree actually worth it? FC, what made you decide to stick with your education rather than dropping out and just building Crimson with your full focus?
Absolutely. For me, I think education has played a really, really transformative role for me over the past decade. When I was in China, I guess the path was already set, right? Going to a good high school, take the Gaokao or the Chinese National Entrance Exam, go to a reputable university in China, and then start my professional life. At that point, that was a very interesting path, but it wasn't very exciting for me. I guess probably, when I was that age, I already have a bit of a risk-taking, I guess, tendency, trying to find things that are more exciting, even without that certainty. So went to New Zealand, and then did my education sense that what I'm doing today with you, Jamie, and the rest of the Crimson organization, I think is definitely not something that I was able to even imagine 5, 10, 15 years ago. So that was very, very meaningful. But for me, I personally feel that this education, being in the industry of education and also getting my own education, are not mutually exclusive. They're hand in hand. I spend a lot of time doing things or utilizing the skills that I acquire from my own education journey, whether it was back in Australia or over in the United States or even in China. The skills I was able to acquire, such as accounting, such as computer science, such as finance, corporate finance, and also product management, even policy, play a very critical role in what I do day to day today. And I do think that those learnings really help me to become a more confident entrepreneur, a more competent people manager, and overall a more holistic entrepreneur. And Jamie, obviously, you've mentioned your background. You've done a lot more education than I did, and you're a global icon for really these prestigious institutions across different disciplines. So yeah, what were your personal reflections on your education in relation to your very successful entrepreneurial journey?
It was actually very interesting because when I was going through college, there was Crimson rapidly scaling, and there was actually some guys in my year at Harvard who were also creating a college admissions counseling firm, probably inspired by Crimson, and they actually all decided to drop out. Not one, not two, but all three of them. And so it was actually a really funny moment where I thought to myself, I've been building this, we've got good momentum. These guys are taking this thing so intensely, they're all going to drop out. Is this the path I need to do? Do I have to do this? But something very deep within me said, actually, first of all, I think it's nuts. Getting into Harvard's a life transformative experience. Like, why would I not finish? It's been a dream of mine for so many years. When I'm 80, would I look back and feel satisfied if I hadn't finished this experience? Is it true to my values? And I thought, no. Then secondly, I thought, if I'm in the education industry and I haven't actually finished my degrees, it's almost like a scam. Like, you are supposed to, as a leader, represent the values of the organization you lead. So I felt, particularly for me, and that I try to be a role model for our students, it was very important to me that not only I finished my Harvard education, but I finished well and I finished strong. And then finally, I just thought, actually, being in this community practically is so good for what we do. We were able to recruit hundreds of Harvard kids to be our first tutors and mentors. I remember going to people's dorms to recruit them, running around with this guy, Woojin, for example, as we talked about the upcoming application season. My roommates like Tafari and Brett and Tim would help with meeting students, filming content for our YouTube channel. I met, professors like David Ager, who were early advisors to Crimson on campus. So I really felt that the experience of being at Harvard actually enabled me to open up this network that I didn't have as a kid from New Zealand with no connections whatsoever to bring this to life. So I felt like from both a purpose perspective and also a practical, pragmatic strategy perspective, it made a lot of sense. And I guess as I've gone through, my next couple of programs, like my MBA and stuff, I felt like going to that experience would really help turbocharge my skills as a leader. I wanted to evolve from, a college kid running around, just lost his braces, to a serious entrepreneur with full business skill set and training. And that was an unusual move to make. Back then actually it was a little bit controversial because, it's quite weird to raise capital and then be in business school. But I felt like over the long term, it was the right call to make. And then I guess as I've gone on, both FC and I have continued to really think about, more studies as a good way to keep leveling up, keep us really dialed in. FC, you and I are obviously perhaps on one side of this argument, but I know some amazing entrepreneurs, folks like, Eva, the founder of The Legalist, or other people like this guy called Kevin, who's created a huge recurring revenue enterprise SaaS cybersecurity company through this Teal Fellowship. And for those of you who don't know what this is, the Teal Fellowship is a scholarship backed by Peter Thiel, a Silicon Valley billionaire, who pays you typically $100,000 to drop out of school to then build your company. And so there's actually a whole culture of these Teal Fellows who've gone the opposite route to us. They've dropped out, and they haven't just like dropped out of anything. They've dropped out of some of the best schools in America to build their company. So I guess my question to you is, FC, do you feel like that scholarship is fundamentally flawed? Do you feel like that approach can work as well? When you hear Teal Fellowship, what's your response?
First of all, when I first learned about this many years ago, I thought that was a very, very interesting opportunity. It's definitely very unconventional. It actively encourages people to give up the education that they've been pursuing when they are very young, and then really start a whole new chapter with a very clean cut. It almost felt, both exciting and, very scary, or a little bit disruptive to me. I think it definitely takes a lot of courage for people to pursue that path. I definitely see some merit to it, as you mentioned, Jamie. I think the program has successfully produced a number of very prominent and successful entrepreneurs in the space. So definitely, sometimes if you're not really enjoying the education you're receiving, or if you don't find that particularly useful, then maybe it's a time for a switch. However, I personally feel that college education is still very, very fundamental to the success of not only entrepreneurs, but also future business and political leaders. If we look at this world, people that are in leadership positions, way more of them, a significant more portion of them have college education than those that don't. So even though this is a very unique stream, it is still a very niche stream.
The other thing I'd say is when you are focused on an venture initially, you might receive a lot of advice from maybe early backers saying, of course, you should drop out, focus on this venture, et cetera, et cetera. But keep in mind, like, their single-minded mission is for this venture to be successful, not necessarily for you to be successful. Your success and their success is correlated, but they're not going to be there to pick up pieces for you, 5 years in if it doesn't work out. They're going to be invested in 50 other companies. And so as a young entrepreneur who's very malleable, influenceable, and often quite differential to different investors and stuff, I think that can also be a dynamic where some of these kids, I think I can think of some that dropped out of school or took a leave from school, kind of under a bit of pressure from their investors. You drop out, you're building your startup. If it's super, super, super successful, great. You've hit it big, maybe you're happy. But I wonder if you're like someone like, for example, Gates or Zuckerberg, would you, when you're 80, still want to have finished your college education? Maybe those guys are so extremely successful, they don't worry. But the vast majority of folks who drop out of college aren't Zuckerberg or Bill Gates. They typically will achieve some outcome that isn't as strong, nowhere remotely close. And it's often a door that when you close, it's hard to kind of go back to, because there's a lot of social factors. When you drop out, it's such a decision. You probably tell your family or friends, you got to explain yourself. Every time you have a dinner table with your cousins for like 5 years, your brain will rewire almost to make yourself have cognitive dissonance. So you feel kind of at peace with this choice. And so I feel like it's actually very hard for you then to go back. It's almost like you change your religion and then you need to go back to the church in order to keep going. So I feel like when I interact with people that have dropped out of college, who have chosen to be entrepreneurs, they often have this chip on the shoulder kind of wiring, which makes it very hard for them to ever re-enter higher education. And I think the good thing about higher education is once you've done it, you can always, pivot, change. You can go to a PhD, you can go to law school, you can go figure out a new path. And I don't like the idea that you've kind of permanently switched off this, door to anything. So I've always thought, entrepreneurship is so risky. Why add even more risk to put yourself in a situation where you literally have like almost no actual way back? Like you can theoretically go back, but I think it's very tough psychologically. And that's what I've seen kind of time and time again. The number of people that actually finish their college degrees once they take a gap year of at least 2 years is quite tiny, because I think momentum is a real thing. And when you get out of the headspace of being a student, it's hard to get back into that headspace. But in a nutshell, we answered the key question: should you, as an aspiring entrepreneur, drop out or stay in school? And I think FC&I came down very conclusively on the side that finishing that college degree is incredibly valuable. Many folks disagree, particularly the Teal Fellow camp, but I think in general, this is definitely the way we recommend at least entrepreneurs think about their education. It's an asset that helps them with a social network, with knowledge, with investors, with community building, with stamina, with this kind of continuous stress management capability. And it's been really integral to our success at Crimson, both as an educational organization and as an entrepreneurial one as well.